And we're live. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm just going to do a quick sound check before we begin. So if you can hear me, please pop your yes into the chat box on the right-hand side, just so that I can see that everybody can hear us okay. If you've been with us before, you know how this works. Just waiting for some replies here. Can everybody hear us okay? Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Always good to know that we're talking to a live audience. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Looks like the audio is great. Thank you. So thank you for joining this UK CCF webinar today, looking at fighting the credit card fraud pandemic in the contact centre industry, brought to you in partnership with SVL Business Solutions. My name is Chantal Newton and I'm the Marketing Manager at the UK Contact Centre Forum. Just got a few housekeeping points to go through before we begin. We want this webinar to be both informative and interactive. So if you do have any questions during the session, please pop them into the chat box you've just used for the sound check, and your questions will be answered by our presenters in the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We have poll questions for you to participate in today. I'll do the first in a second. The polls should appear automatically on the right-hand side of the browser. If they don't appear automatically, please click the polls tab when prompted. So our webinar today is expected to last an hour. If you are unable to stay the whole session, the webinar is being recorded and the link will be emailed to all participants within 24 hours of the webinar ending. So I'm just going to get started with our first poll question. So if you could just go to your polls tab if it hasn't automatically appeared, and just gauge some reaction from you guys. Ooh, sorry, there we go. There we are. So the question is, does your organisation currently offer your customer the option to pay by credit card over the phone? Just a simple yes, no. And your answers will come through live to us as they go, and it's always fun to watch the blue line shooting up and down. Thank you very much. Fantastic, thank you. So there's it's changing. So yes, we've got a high percentage there of yes. With 72%, was 77, but somebody's changed their mind. There we go, and I'm going to end that poll there. Fantastic. So just to get our presentation started and to discuss those poll results, I'm going to pass you over to the lovely Debbie of SVL Business Solution. Debbie, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Chantal, for the introduction there, and also thank you to yourself and Trevor for inviting SVL and our speakers today. We're really honoured to be a part of this, and we've been looking forward to it. So the topics we're going to cover today, I'll go over in a moment, but they're extremely important, not just because people have moved to home working, prior to that, during home working and beyond. So we'd really like to share some of our experience with you today. So I'll introduce myself. As Chantal said, my name's Debbie Bicker. I'm one of the business development managers at SVL. We are based up in East Kilbride, just outside Glasgow. We cover the whole of the UK and Ireland, providing contact centre solutions throughout the UK and Ireland, as I said. We've brought two speakers on today. We are very fortunate to be connected closely with our two speakers, and they've become good colleagues and friends of mine, and a fabulous support to us in the journey that we're going through just now. So the first one is Steve Jones. He's a commercial director from Gala Technology. Now you might be wondering who Gala Technology are. They're actually the developers behind the solution that we support to help fraud and PCI compliance, and we are their contact centre partner of choice. Really honoured that Galatech have chosen us to do this. We love the solution. There's so many awards. In fact, I think I said to you personally, Steve, but don't mind saying in front of everyone, congratulations again, because you just recently won the Best International Card Not Present programme winner, and I think that's second year in a row. So well done for that. With the awards you'll see in one of my slides coming up, there's a lot of awards happening at Galatech, so we're delighted to be their partner of choice in the contact centre space. Also delighted to introduce our next speaker, which will be John Greenwood. Now, we could probably spend the whole hour talking about John's credentials in the contact centre world. He's got over 30 years experience. I personally, every time I speak to John, I just feel that I learn something new. So it's a real pleasure to work with him and become friends with him over the years. Back in 2015, he actually wrote and presented a case study on home working, and that was at the European PCI conference. So I think it's safe to say that he really does know what he's talking about. He's even advised the government on national contact centre skills, and he supported the publication of the PCI Security Standard Council supplement. So we're in good hands today to send you away with some great information, some new knowledge, and things to help you support your organisation. So let's just move forward. Things that you're going to take away today. So you're going to understand the scale and impact of the current crisis. I think if you're like me, when I first became involved in this, you'll be quite shocked at the scale and what we're expecting, how that's going to rise as we move forward. Why we got here, the two gents that we've brought on today will discuss that, you know, how we've ended up where we are today and what that's looking like going forward. When we're moving forward, you need to think about that, what that's like for yourself, the organisation you're in, you know, your reputation. Nobody ever wants the reputation to be damaged. Once that happens, it's very difficult to repair. Things like fraud and PCI breaches can be really detrimental to your relationships with your customers. And really importantly, which will be touched on in more detail with the gents, is your staff safety. What you can do to avoid the fraud and what your legal obligations are, importantly, because if you're anything like many organisations out there, they don't actually know. They think they know. They might be going by very old ruling, and equally there's a lot of people out there that are looking at the rulings that they've seen and just seeing that it was maybe felt that it was too intense, but we're able to help break that down for you and make it seem very easy and very approachable to get that going in your organisation. So people might be wondering just now why SVL, you know, you might know us as a call recording company. Why are we thinking about fraud? Why are we thinking about PCI compliance? Well, the answer to that really is about, I think it was 2004 when this first came into play, PCI compliance. Us being a call recording company, there was such a challenge faced for us because overnight we were literally having customers phoning, asking us to turn their call recordings off. Now, as an organisation, that was a big problem, as you can imagine, but not just for us, because there was a challenge for customers. We believe that there's many reasons why you would use call recording. You know, it could be for compliance, it could be for disputes resolution, customer service, staff training. All of these things are all really important, but actually when you're looking at all the reasons for that, we actually believe that there's, you know, every call that a customer makes into your business, every call that you have should potentially be recorded. So there's an argument to say that all your calls should be recorded going forward. This gives us a big issue with PCI, so we got very much involved in it. We found various solutions over the years. Some of them we still have in the organisation to date, but they have certainly evolved, and this is where we really have come into a new field with this, working alongside Steve and the team at Gala Technology. SVL are providing solutions in the contact centre space for over 50 years now, so it's really important for us to make sure that we're doing what we need to present our customers with the right solutions that keep their business going. We do that very much in a consultative approach. So we're not turning up with a bag of tricks and trying to sell like some organisations do. We're very much looking to listen to you, see what challenges your organisations are facing, and see how we can support that if we can or not. Equally, account management is really big for us, and I think it's testament to see we've got some customers that have been with us for 20-25 years now, so that kind of thing doesn't happen by accident. We've got the full wraparound of support, so we've got project management team, we've got the service team, we've got pre-sales, post-sales, and all these fantastic partners that we work with. So we're in a very strong place in the contact centre environment, and this has become a very big part of our business. won't go over this slide today, but I just wanted to let you know this is some of the other things that we do that you may already know us for in the contact centre space just now, and some of the partners that we work with. So I'll leave you to have a look at that when you get the slides sent out to you yourself. I mentioned partnerships, so before I hand over to the key speakers today, I want to just touch on that. So SVL have, we've been chosen by Galatech to be their contact centre partner of choice. One of the reasons that this really works for us is the credentials that they've brought to this. They've got their own story. It started off in their own business, which Steve will discuss with you, but they've actually created an award-winning solution. I've got on the screen there just a few of the awards that they've won over the years, and I think I just wonder where they're putting them all, actually, because the awards are just coming in thick and fast, and it's really important for us to work in partnership. No organisation can be a master of everything, but we've got the right people to work closely with us who are always keeping abreast of the new developments, and we're very fortunate that we do that with Galatech, with Compliance 3 as well for John. I mean, John, as I said to you, about his 30 years experience alone is fantastic for us. So it means that we're actually taking good solutions into the customer space, and sometimes there'll be other reasons why we actually have to bring these experts in to follow on those discussions in further detail. So partnerships is a very big part of our future. So just with that in mind, if you don't mind, I'd like to hand over to John Greenwood of Compliance 3. Over to you, John.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Debbie. Build up there. Crikey, let's crack on. Okay, so this is what we're going to discuss. I think it's important to understand how we've ended up here. I don't mean the virus, but how we've been able to cope with it. I think the risks and putting those into some context and perspective is going to be important, understanding some of the drivers behind that. And then I think as long as we've got our heads around what we're responsible for, I think that's going to allow us to tackle some of these challenges. Steve's going to pick up in a case study and talk a little bit about some European regulations that are impacting on the drivers, and then we'll focus on the takeaways. Okay, ready for it? Here we go. So what's the situation at the moment? We know that COVID was really forced upon us. And I think generally organizations responded to it very quickly. And I think they've done that in a prioritized approach. I think Gartner's been summarizing that very well, that people were looking at, look, let's think of people's safety first. Let's get them connected then to business applications, critical business applications. I noticed from the little poll that we did, 75% of you are taking cards over the phone at the moment. But how many of you are doing that securely? Obviously, taking cards and maintaining that continuity of revenue was critical at the beginning. And probably your existing cloud architectures allowed you to do that smoothly. So we can see that cloud has been a big facilitator of us responding to COVID, and cloud has been so many definitions around it. I mean, so many different clouds. Just look out of the window, and cloud can mean so many things to different people. But it has provided greater agility. It is delivering greater resistance, and the key thing here is that all of the conversations I've been listening to recently, both with clients, with colleagues, looking at all of the LinkedIn conversations, we know that work from home can work, right? And I've listed here at the bottom of the slide, you can see them, and that there are specialist organizations that have focused that on facilitating that. And absolutely, it's got benefits. It's got some real benefits, both from a cost, a people and a cost side. But there are some dangers too, and I think it's those dangers of not being prepared properly, of not understanding what could happen. I think those are the big frustrations, and those are the things we need to learn more about. Hopefully, we'll cover some of those in this session now. The key thing I'm picking up and it is a generalization. I'm sure many of you have got your own ideas on this, but there seems to be a feeling that we're not going to get all our contact center people back into the contact center very quickly. And we're not able to meet some of the safety restrictions that either government's putting on us or our own organizations are putting on us. We're not going to be able to do that straight away. So I think work from home is going to continue in some capacity, different organizations, different ways, but this is a part of the operational mix now. And I think many organizations have seen some benefits and are looking at how they can grasp those benefits in the long term. But let's have a look at some of the things we should be considering. Yeah, what are the downsides of this, and how do we adjust to it? Well, one of the things that I've talked to organizations about and asked the question, and part of the PCI DSS conversations around it, frankly, under the PCI DSS, we're supposed to test our incident response plans annually and document them. But I don't think pandemic's been part of that, right? To be honest, I don't think that's been on the list, right? And I'm sure it will be in future, absolutely, right? But it brings up some special scenarios, and certainly pushing people into the homes, asking them to get the balance right between their home environments, and seeing it as an employer, as an organization, really understanding that you're asking that employee to share their home with you so you can deliver services to the customers. And I don't think many organizations have switched it round. But what I'm sensing is that because not every organization really understood the dangers that they had in their own centralized contact center, I think that we're seeing a scenario where many organizations have gone from the frying pan to the fire, right? Now, what do I mean by that? One of the things that we had to tackle when launching with when I was supporting and helping a group of people through the PCI Council, a big community effort, one of the things that people didn't really understand was that spoken payment card data, the utterance of spoken payment card data, actually brought infrastructure into scope. And by infrastructure, it means all of those cloud service providers that are giving us all the flexibility, all the agility that we wanted when we actually began to cope with COVID, when we began to get people working from home. What does that mean? Well, what it means, if you've got spoken card data in your environment, all the controls apply. And many organizations do apply controls. Certainly applications like pause, resume, they don't make you compliant. That's a real myth, and we're not here to discuss those myths. But what we are focusing on here are the risks. And the risks are that pause, resume only really takes your call recorder and the call recording storage out of scope. It still leaves your people in scope. It still leaves your environment in scope. Yeah. Now then, we can't apply all those controls that we can apply in the contact center, the centralized contact center. We can't apply them at home, right? The process things, the don't have a mobile on your desktop things, right? All of those things are so difficult to employ in the home. Right, and we have to accept. I've shared this slide here. This is from the World Economic Forum, right? But when you look at the world economies and the world in context, cyber attacks and data fraud have been listed as the top 5 over the last 7 years, right? And it doesn't go away. And the point I'm trying to make is that whilst things are centralized, you've got far many more options to manage that risk and to put in place policies and procedures and use technologies like a security card for checking in the environment, right? How do we know who's sitting in that your employee's room? How do we know what pressures they've got at home without asking and supporting those colleagues that are working from home in a way that's protecting them from these risks? And certainly, you know, when you look at the split of cyber attacks, You know, you've got this 70-30 split where 55% of all your cyber attacks, and this is Verizon's report, super well respected. It was only out last month. These are their latest figures. You know, 55% of all attacks are involving organized crime. And organized crime these days, you know, isn't just a few folks down the street, you know, wearing the little masks and with the stripy t-shirts, right? No, this is state organized crime that are having a go at your people at home because they're more vulnerable at home than they are in your centralized workspace, right? So we've got to get our heads around the fact that we've got to protect our people. Here's something else, right? And this is mind-numbing, right? This is from IBM's Poneman report. This, again, super well-respected report, right? We're basically saying that organizations, on average, in the UK, aren't going to find out that they've had a data compromise until the end of January, right? 243 days is the average, right? And I'm sure IT departments will tell you that, well, you know, their organization is secure, they've got everything under control, but have they, right? Because on average, this isn't the stat. So, you know, what we're looking at is a scenario where we've probably got a time bomb here. We've got a scenario that after peak trading, sometime in January, organizations are going to be picking up that they've been compromised through a work from home shift that was forced upon us through COVID. And you know, the question we're asking here is, are we really keeping our people and our customer data safe, right? That's the real question. And have we really got that nailed down, right? So spoken card data putting your people at risk, you know, organization becoming exposed to fraud. Steve, talk through a case study for us here.
Yeah, so thanks for that, John, and good afternoon, everybody. For any latecomers, I'm Stephen Jones, Commercial Director at Gala Technology, and we're delighted to be having the opportunity today alongside our partners at SVL, and indeed thanks to Chantel at UKCCF for hosting the event. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit and give you some real-life case study about why Gala Technology developed the SOC Pay solution, which we provide via SVL under the guise of Secure Pay. So why was it born? Well, it was born long before coronavirus was ever heard of. In fact, it was born in 2012, where our sister company were experiencing significant problems when predominantly over the telephone. So our sister company are Gala Tents. They're the largest manufacturer and retailer of marquees in the UK, processing about 25,000 telephony transactions a year via a dozen agents, to the tune of around £10 million. So what were those frustrations and challenges that the tent company were having? Well, they were processing payments in the traditional manner, which means the telephone rings, the agent engage with the customer, and at some point, the customer was asked to read out their sensitive card information, the long card number, the expiry date, the three numbers on the back. And that was then handled by the employee, which obviously triggers PCI compliance because that card data now is in the business, the merchant's environment, and becomes their responsibility to look after. And that would then typically be processed via either a chip and pin machine or more commonly into a virtual terminal. And when you enter those details into a virtual terminal, what happens is it goes away and asks two questions. Is the card reported lost or stolen? And is there enough money in the account? And there was a scenario in 2012 where the phone rang, the agent engaged with the customer. They built an order to the tune of £9,000 for a large event that the customer purported to be from an events company and needed dozens of marquees for an event they were putting on in Stoke-on-Trent. The agent built the order as normal and then asked the cardholder to read their information out over the phone to him, to which he did, processed through the virtual terminal, and away it went to do those basic checks. It then came back that it was authorized, which meant the goods were then picked, packed, and delivered, but ultimately stolen. But we didn't know this at this point until a fortnight later, when the genuine cardholder opened up his credit card bill to a £9,000 statement from a tent company he'd never heard of. So the first thing that he did, obviously, is contact his bank to say, I think I've been defrauded. The bank then contacted the tent company to say, unfortunately, as it details in your terms and conditions of your merchant account, if there's any fraud that occurs in a card not present transaction and the transaction is not authenticated, then you as the business are liable to pick up that bill. Simply put, it means we lost £9,000 worth of equipment and we had to refund the genuine cardholder to the same amount. Not a great day in the office, as you can imagine. And things went from bad to worse because then we were put on some sort of sucker list on the dark web, and every fraudster and his dog came shopping. And in the height of summer in 2012, the tent company lost nearly £50,000 related to fraud-related chargebacks. That became a massive problem for the company. Other headaches that we had were due to the associated risk of card not present payments and fraud-related chargebacks. Our acquiring partner, who acquire the funds from the cardholder and settle that into our business account, tend to levy incremental charges to your processing costs. Putting some meat on the bones of that, we were being charged 0.5% of the transaction value as an incremental charge, which was costing us over £40,000 a year. Also, because of the associated risk of card not present fraud, we were advised that we should only deliver goods or services to the registered cardholder's address, which doesn't really work in today's kind of digital Amazon world. And recent studies have shown that organizations turn away over £1 billion worth of good business in the UK alone every year by following those kind of guidance or guidelines. So we looked around for a solution. We considered the likes of IVR and DTMF suppression. And once we looked at those, it became clear that that would solve the PCI compliance headache because it would stop card data from entering our environment. So that was one of the boxes ticked. But unfortunately, it could still be a stolen card. Even though we weren't handling the card information, the customer essentially would be keying in a long card number, an expiry date, and the 3 numbers on the back. So we still couldn't evidence and prove that it was the genuine cardholder, which would have meant that we were still liable for fraud-related chargebacks, £40,000 worth of incremental charges, and we still can't deliver goods or services to a third-party address. So, bearing in mind that there's currently 13.5 million compromised or stolen cards available to purchase on the dark web as of this morning, we decided to develop our own technology. So we built SotPay, or as SVL brand it, the Secure Pay technology. And I'm delighted to say that it solved all the pain points. We were instantly able to achieve PCI compliance because we had no card data in our environment. We haven't had a fraud-related chargeback now in over 8 years. Neither have any of the merchants who have subsequently used the technology. And because we convert a non-secure risky transaction into an authenticated transaction, that also reduced our processing costs. So we negated those £40,000 worth of incremental charges. And by being able to evidence that it was the genuine cardholder and counter any chargeback claims, that now enables us to deliver goods or services to a third-party address. So as Debbie mentioned earlier on, Gala Technology has since gone on from strength to strength, and I must say with the help of Mr. Greenwood as well. Over the last couple of years, we've picked up the best use of technology at the UK CCF Awards for taking secure and compliant payments, not only over the telephony channel, but now in other digital channels, which are becoming more and more popular, such as web chat or social media. We've also won Security Innovation of the Year at the National Payments Awards and the National Call and Contact Centre Awards. And as Debbie kindly stated earlier on, we have for the second year running just won Best International Card Not Present Solution. But something that we're probably the proudest about is alongside John Greenwood, our digital approach has now been included by the PCI Council's latest guidance on how merchants can help secure and take compliant payments across the telephony channel, which has led to us winning back-to-back global PCI recognition as well. So all that sounds great and a job well done from Gala Technology. However, if we look at the wider problem, there's still a great deal of work to be done. And despite investment by the finance industry last year, preventing £1.8 billion worth of unauthorised fraud, criminals still got away with about 1.2 billion. And nearly 50% of that was payment card fraud. That equates to about £620 million worth of fraud lost in the UK alone last year on UK issued cards. 75% of that 625 million was used in the card not present channel. And that means that card not present fraud has now risen by 112% in the last 8 years. Now, all these facts and figures were pre-coronavirus, COVID-19. And I read a report that shocked me this morning to say that the police are now reporting since mid-February, there has been a 400% increase in fraudulent activity. So as John posed the question, your organization is at risk, your reputation is at risk, your cash flow, etc., is all at risk. So it's very important, if you take something away from this session, is how am I protecting my organization from fraud-related chargebacks, additional processing costs, customer journey needs can be enhanced by using the right solutions. But one key point that John's now going to take over and talk about is protecting your employees. John, back to you.
No, thanks, Steve, and some fascinating numbers there, and I've heard a number of stats on the amount of fraud that's been detected. A similar figure, 370 odd thousand, I think Visa have picked up globally, of increased card fraud through simple things like phishing and I think it's around. I was just noting recently. I'm going to refer to about 85% of all malware contains keyloggers, right? Which of course is picking up data in the background, particularly on bring your own device. But I put this slide up for us to talk to here a little bit. And I hopefully you guys at home or in the offices have had a chance to read through that. I'm not going to read it off the board, but you know, our employees are being approached even in our centralized call centers. This is a quote from 2011, I think. 2016, Rob, 2011 or 2016? I can't quite see behind the photograph. 2011, yeah. And you know, our call center organizations have been infiltrated by organized crime for many years, and I'm not sure management are all aware of what's happening. This is really impacting on our culture. I've seen examples of payment card data back in 2011, 2012 would sell in outside the contact center for £50 a pop, right? For a name and address, card number. And you guys know, you folks out there know how much our colleagues are paid for working on the coalface. And we know that 50, 100, 250, 500 pounds over Christmas makes a difference in those households. Right, and the challenge is, you know, that this stuff goes on, and it's putting our people under pressure, right? It's putting our people under unknown pressure, and to put that £50 in some sort of context, in some call center car parks now, when we did have, you know, those car parks, but in the high street, in people's house, in the housing estates where our employees are living, right, you can buy card data with a name and address, right, for £5. And the price hasn't gone down because there's less of it, right? For heaven's sake. I mean, this is just simple demand and supply, right? So this is a real problem that the call center industry isn't really talking about yet. And you know, what have we got to do? We can't treat our employees like criminals, right? You just can't go down that route. We've spent decades avoiding, I remember, to go back to the early 90s and look at telecultures. A lot of you young people won't remember that, but there was, you know, looking at how we treat phone calls and how we are effective with phone calls. And there's a guy called Michael Argyle, Queen Margaret's College, that said it's 4.3 times more influencing how we say something than what we say. And our entire contact center management is geared towards making people comfortable on the coalface, allowing one informed human being to have a conversation with another informed human being, and making that work. And our whole management structures are about making that work. So you can't start treating people like criminals. We've got to address this by taking the temptation away. And I love this slide, particularly at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Makes me think of that. But taking the temptation of fraud away is an ideal solution, a much more worthwhile approach than beginning to treat our staff, our persuaders, our frontline voice of the brand, treating them like criminals. It's just not. It's not sustainable, and it's not going to work, right? And when we look at some of the drivers here, we understand how our contact centers are moving. You know, we're trying to keep pace with customers, the digitization of the economy, etc. But some of the drivers are because crime's just ahead of us, right? Organized crime is just ahead of the technology industry's ability to keep track. Yeah, and that causes a problem. So we've seen a hardening of the legal obligations around protecting data. You know, the GDPR, you know, was law 2 years. You know, 2016 it became law. 2018, of course, it became regulated within the law, and the whole landscape's changing around the European payments community as well, and how that's changing. Steve, you've got a few thoughts about PSD2 and how it's all changed, and some of the changes that you've seen with your clients.
Sure, yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, so PSD2, the Payment Service Directive Part 2. I wouldn't be surprised if many attendees today have not heard of this, but it's something that you need to be aware of, both from you being a consumer and also from you being a business entity. So PSD2 really is linked to kind of try and get e-commerce channels more secure. So if we look at the history of fraud, we used to talk about clone cards at petrol stations and dodgy signatures in shops. And that's where the problem was, in the card present environment. So the payments ecosystem came together to deploy the chip and pin technology. And in many cases, it's done its job. It stopped that card present fraud. However, the fraud didn't stop. It simply just shifted channel to card not present, e-commerce and telephony. And that's continued to grow and snowball massively with some of the numbers that I mentioned earlier on. Globally, you're into the tens of billions that are being lost on an annual basis. So the payments ecosystem has now come together to launch PSD2, the Payment Service Directive Part 2. And part of that is something called SCA, Strong Customer Authentication. Simply put, that means that all e-commerce transactions, and this was supposed to be mandated and going live on the 14th of September last year, but not everybody in the payments ecosystem was ready. COVID-19 has obviously happened now, so that's been pushed back now till the 14th of September 2021. But you'll probably start to see bits and pieces of PSD2 and SCA in your day-to-day activities moving forward. But SCA simply means that for all e-commerce transactions, after that deadline where it's mandated into the UK and Europe, all e-commerce transactions will need to go through some additional authentication steps. So we can prove and evidence that it is the genuine cardholder who's processing those transactions. Now, we've already seen fraud jump from card present to card not present. And by securing the e-commerce channel, what Visa and MasterCard and the other card schemes are now alluding to is that leaves the telephony channel as the weakest link. So if we've secured physical retail with chip and pin, and now we've secured e-commerce, the fraudsters aren't going to stop. It's simply going to funnel down the telephone. And if you're processing transactions in a traditional manner, with the card data being spoken into your environment, or even if you're using IVR or DTMF suppression, there is a risk that you are exposed to fraud because you cannot prove or authenticate that it is the genuine cardholder. And therefore, as John's put on the screen here, the Joint Fraud Task Force have concurred with the card schemes that the securing of e-commerce will cause an increase in motor fraud. So one of the takeaways that I personally want you to take away today is just to think about future-proofing your business. Okay, not only taking secure and compliant transactions over the telephone, but also in other digital channels, web chat, social media platforms, etc. We even, Gala Technology conducted the first secure and compliant payment over video chat a couple of weeks ago. John, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think you touched on a good point there about the multi-channel aspect of our contact centers these days, and how our contact centers have adopted and are catching up with the customer on these multi-channels. I do sense, I mean, listen to the news like everybody else over the last few weeks, that companies are aiming towards this sort of almost like survive or thrive decisions, and the contact center is going to be more and more important to organizations, because they're not going to deliver. You know, we saw the high street opened up, didn't we? I know in Scotland it hasn't quite opened up yet in the same way in Wales, but we're not going to see the same footfall, the same spend in retail. We're seeing greater focus on the internet, and of course, as that's getting more secure, absolutely, you know, our contact centers are going to come under pressure. So the big thing that we've been talking about, all the fraud, we've been setting this environment of the numbers and so forth. But one thing you've just got to remember is this isn't, you know, payment card security isn't a PCI issue. It's a data protection issue, right? And we all know how the data protection laws apply. You know, that's 4 times global turnover, blah, blah. You know, and all of the obligations we have under the Data Protection Act that have come over the general, you know, out of the general data protection regulation, all of those apply. This is a legal obligation now. You know, this is a corporate governance issue, because, right, we've got to look at data security by design and default. That's what the law says. And I'm not sure that it's a convincing argument to say, actually, you know, taking a few payment cards in my employee's bedroom or the front lawn or in a shared environment, that's security by design and default. And I suspect that in 343 days' time, on average, when there are data compromises that have been found and secured, right, and obviously those have got to be reported to the ICO. And the ICO will tap on the door and say, look, we just need to find out and go through our forensic investigation as to how this happened. It's very important. We had to send people home, and we thought that, yeah, obviously taking card payments over the phone was critical to our business. And you did that in people's bedrooms by design, and you thought that was secure, did you? Doesn't sound great, does it? Doesn't sound great. And I do think that certainly here's a slide just looking at the ICO guidance. This is taken from their website. That the ICO will consider, you know, that it is a, you know, the PCI DSS, you know, just to put it bluntly, is the minimum international data security standard that you as an organization have probably signed to say that you meet. And you've had to do that as a contractual obligation with your bank so that you can have the benefits of taking money off customers using a payment card in this super convenient way that just, you know, reduces the friction in the process, right? You've committed to say you do that securely. You're committed to say, I think there are 34 instances within the standard that says, if you have a major change, a significant change, it says, you've got to report that to your bank. It also says if you've had a significant change, you need to reassess. And I'm not sure people have been troubled with that. I don't think people have been active doing that. Talking to the banks, they're not having hundreds and thousands of phone calls to say, we've actually shifted all our people to home. We're reassessing the situation. We will fill in our SAQ. We'll get the QSA in if we're a large organization. The banks aren't hearing that. So our organizations are massively exposed to the ICO asking these questions, and they ask the question, did you inform your bank of this risk change? Right? Did you make everybody aware of this risk change? How was the risk assessment? Right? So we are not really, I haven't found any organization yet that I've spoken to in the last 3-4 months that really is in a defendable position. So we've got to play catch up. Right, and we've you know, we've got this general scenario now where it's it's clear and the guidance is clear, and the PCI Council have been promoting the guidance. Jeremy King's actively been promoting it. It does have 15 references to homeworking in it. So the card schemes are very happy that we'd covered that one when we're drafting it and publishing it. But just the fact that you've got spoken card data in your environment, it just means that all your infrastructure is in scope, and which means that you've got to apply all of the standard all of the time to your environment. And if you're saying, right, that as organizations, you're happy that your employees' homes are now part of your PCI scope and you're dealing with it, great. But I think the real world is that you're probably not, right? And I think the real world is you've probably not acknowledged that, you know, your employees' homes are now part of your scope, right? And I think that's a scary thing, and I think it needs dealing with, and we should put it on top of the pile. And it's not just yourselves as organizations, it's your supply chain, right? And PCI works just like GDPR. You know, you've got this chain of compliance, data controller, data processor, sub-processor, and so forth. And, you know, as merchants, you've got obligations to do due diligence on your outsourcers. But if your outsourcer has moved your call handling to their home environment, what are you doing about checking that they've got all that secure, you know, as a merchant? And again, I'm not hearing that much activity out there of people being busy looking after all of this, right? So this is a quote from Troy Leach. Troy Leach is part of the furniture at the PCI Council, and he put it very succinctly, right, in 2016. And you know, Troy sees a lot, right? And you know, I think it says it all there. You know, if you limit exposure, simplify compliance, exactly. But you know, everybody's fighting the criminal now, and it's the criminal activity that's driving it. So let's look at who's responsible very quickly. Just moving on, right? Of course, it's your executive team, you know, that's responsible. And as I've mentioned before, you know, it's about Data Protection Act. It's about the obligation of security by design and default, as we've already mentioned, and these minimum levels of data security that the PCI DSS is for payment card data, which we know is personal data, right? And I just wanted to share this with you. This came out last month. It's from the World Economic Forum again. I know I referred to them earlier, but this is looking at the next 18 months outlook, and it's looking what entities, what businesses are most worried about. And if we're entering a period, if we're entering a period of long recession, and we know what recession is, you know, 2 quarters of negative growth, and you know, look at what the UK's reported. You know, is it 20% reduction in growth, so GDP of the last measures? So we're looking at prolonged recession. The impact on organisations with bankruptcies is just, you know, it's fertilizer on the fields for organised crime, right? And I know organisations are looking to survive and thrive, but we've got to make it easy for ourselves by protecting our employees and making sure we're putting those vulnerable employees, you know, secure by not treating them as criminals and taking fraud away. Okay, so let's get on to the takeaways to give us some time for a Q&A. Absolute, we've got a lot of change here. You know, change, as Steve was saying, as we've secured the face-to-face channel and the legislation through GDPR, data protection, and through changes in the whole payments environment, we're going to push more fraud down into our contact centers, right? And we've got the customer changing to digital channels, and you know, and freedom to serve self-service, putting our data, centralized data, making that more open to the customer to access to self-serve, just is a massive change. And we've got to consider that change from a security point of view to keep our people, process, technologies secure. That's the first piece. Looking at the second piece, you know, absolutely, we've got to minimize the footprint. Let's just take the temptation of fraud away and prevent payment card data, you know, minimizing scope, which is minimizing the data footprint, which again is referenced very strongly within the data protection regulation. And thirdly, you know, working from home has got some fantastic benefits, right? Some real good benefits all the way through, right? And there are people that have made it work brilliantly and have found those benefits. And I think it's a great way to get the balance right between, you know, what the business wants and what the employee is looking for and what customers want. You know, we all want to look after and put customer service first, and for that we need happy employees, you know, who feel safe and comfortable with what they're saying, right? But we've got to do it in the context of a full risk assessment, you know, and really look at the impact that this change is going to have on their individuals and exposing them to organized crime. And just to share with you one thought before we go to the Q&As is I can envisage within 3 to 4 years, right? That's what I was saying before COVID, and it's probably going to happen in less, that we've got class actions against employers who've got large call centers from employees who've been exposed to organized crime, who've you know, fathers who've had their daughters, you know, siblings, whatever, kids working in the call center being tapped up by organized crime as a soft touch, right? And I can just see that's something we've got to work very hard to prevent. Yeah, so we've got to get the balance right between customer experience, cost and risk. Yeah, and from me, I think over to a Q&A there now. Thanks for that.
Thanks, John. I'm just going to go straight to a question. I know that Steve's been answering William's question in the chat, but I think it's such an interesting question. If I could put it to you, John, as well, if that's okay, Steve. Are you all happy for me to do that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Fantastic, thank you. So William has asked, sorry, just get it back here. So William's comment was, the money isn't lost, it gets used for other things. Would the panel like to mention some of the reasons how credit card fraud is part of proper criminal activity?
Steve, do you
well, I've just answered William there that you know, from the merchant's perspective, from the business, then the money is lost. But he's absolutely right that organised crime are using this stolen data for crimes, including firearms and drug trafficking, people trafficking. And I also mentioned that you work alongside UK Finance from time to time, who have recently reported a number of wins against the bad guys.
Yeah, I don't know who's watching the one of the is it Netflix series about laundering money? You know, this money isn't lost. Well, William, you've got to hit the nail on the head. It's not lost. No, this is bad money doing bad things. This is putting this is used to get kids into drugs and drug trafficking. This is bad stuff, right? And we are funding that bad stuff. And if I was being harsh, I'd say maybe through our oversight, you could say negligence of exposing our employees to these sort of risks, you know, and exposing our organizations to these sort of risks. And I think part of this session is perhaps putting the lights on a bit to say how bad the problem is, and that the contact center industry globally is next in the firing line. You know, we haven't seen anything yet, folks, right? Haven't seen anything yet. And as PSD2 begins to click in and the internet channel becomes more secure through strong customer authentication, which really is two-factor authentication, criminals, they're not going to pack up their bags, folks. They're not going to say, oh, fair cop, Gov. Fair cop, you've got me. I'll take my mask off. I'm going straight. Absolutely not. It's not going to happen. We can't be that naive. Our industry is in for a rough ride over the next 5 to 10 years, or, you know, dealing with organized crime. And this change that we've had is an ideal moment for us to address it. It's a fantastic moment for really, you know, examine how we've been doing things and re-look at this and put our people first. To be fair, the industry always has done. You know, we've always recognized that the coalface is where all the work's done. You know, that's the real interface between business and the customer. But we've got to look after them, folks. We really have.
I think another point, John, you know, that the problem was bad, wasn't it, with organised crime and scams, etc., pre-coronavirus. It's just blown up. I think every other day you're reading something in the newspaper or on the news reports that there's another big scam about whether it's for face masks or COVID tests and trying to steal your card information. Just had a quick look there. So some positive news that the dedicated card and payments crime unit, which is funded by the banking industry, convicted 75 fraudsters last year who were sentenced to 100 years in prison, and 23 organised crime gangs were disrupted by the industry-sponsored police unit. So some positive, but for everyone that they shut down, there's going to be another 10 that are springing up from nowhere. So no, it's a really good point, William, and it just goes to show that bad news for the business, but it's bad news for the kind of world and the terrorist organisations and stuff that are being funded by the stolen card data. So yeah, great point.
And Steve, I'm sure you won't mind me saying there's most days there's really a day goes by that I don't have either an email or a text from Steve giving me some new stats that have come out that day of something that's happened to an organisation, something, some form of fraud that's being committed. So it's a really good point that you raise that, William. There's so much more to this. The point that we really want to make today is that there's things that we can do about it. And we can help, we can be the driving force. But listening to Steve and John, I listen to both of them on a regular basis, but at each time I feel I'm learning and hearing something new from them. And I think that comes from the passion that they put into what they're trying to deliver, because they care so much about the contact centre industry. So we can be at the heart of making that change, because our brains are not programmed to think like a fraudster. We think, maybe coronavirus or all these things are happening in the world. People are generally good. Fraudsters aren't. So it's, really good to get these things out each. If you follow any of us on LinkedIn, you'll see these points being shared on a regular basis. Things to look out for.
I think another point, Debbie, is just to consider, as John touched on earlier, is the reputational damage for the business. So probably, I won't name names in here. We've probably all seen it on the front of the newspapers, or an airline that had a large data breach recently. There's numbers of fines and penalties of around 18 billion being bandied around the industry at the moment. So it can be absolutely catastrophic, and all the way down to smaller merchants. I think there was evidence that showed that about 60% of SMEs that suffer some sort of breach don't recover.
Yeah, I've actually had a conversation very recently about this, because someone that I was speaking to at the time, they said it's absolutely fine because we've had a conversation with our client base. They understand that we're under, that we've got a bit of risk, but they just want us to get home. They want us to be able to take the calls and continue to take payments, etc., and everything be recorded. But that was a very loose conversation, and it was very alarming to me, because ultimately something happens to fraud or a PCI breach, and that reputation factor is just the reputation and the relationship, that nice warm conversation that took place, it almost didn't happen anymore. And the relationship, you work hard for years to get your customers and keep them. Something like that happening ultimately is actually on your organization's shoulders. So it's really important to just build as much knowledge you can. It's not as complicated as it seems. So it's very easy to make sure that you're doing all the right things rather than avoiding.
Yeah, I think the thing is here, we've got to see this as an opportunity to reflect and move forward into a new world. And I think, we've got to act before it becomes a real problem. We know, our objectives for serving a customer. We know we've got to support our frontline staff. We've just got to make sure we deal with these future problems. And I guess the point we're making is that these problems are here now. It's just that we're not really prioritizing them, and for sure we've had other things to prioritize, but let's see this as a real opportunity to move forward from here and use this COVID experience as a way to reflect and then make things better for all stakeholders, including our customers, our shareholders, and our employees as we move forward.
So I think just on that point as well, Debbie, with you mentioning it's all well and good that a company saying to their outsourcer or whoever it may be, we want you to carry on taking payments. However, the merchant has their obligation to ensure that their third-party provider is processing these in a secure and compliant
way.
manner.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether they have a data breach, John, I'm right in saying that they would be in breach of their merchant agreement.
Well, they would, and I'm not sure that they're probably saying that they're outsourced, because I can see the common sense in prioritizing, but I'm not sure that they've got that agreement with the bank. You know, if the bank's written to them and say, no, you're quite fine for your outsourcer to take those payments in an unsecure way, how long are you doing it for and how many payments, and they've got that risk signed off. But I suspect they've not talked to the bank, and they're sort of speaking without really a full knowledge of their contractual obligations with the bank, or really have they got that signed off by the board that it's actually exposing them to a data protection risk. You know, now if all that's done knowingly, then that's a known risk, and that's fine, because businesses are geared up to deal with known risks. But it's dealing with them naively that is a problem. By not knowing is a problem, and seeing it in the round holistically. Bank, board, you know, governance, as well as customer management and continuity of business. It's balancing all that, balancing, you know, that cost, risk, and customer experience piece. I think that's what's got to be applied.
Yeah, and you know, just on a positive note on that, Steve, what I've noticed is recently in the last few weeks, a lot more organisations are realising that, you know, ultimately this isn't a temporary situation that they're in, and that they do, you know, everyone was a bit frightened. They just really wanted to keep the businesses going, wanted to keep their staff safe, and some very quick, possibly naive decisions were made, as you pointed out there, that they made these decisions because they were almost forced into it, and now they realise that. So the compliance people, all the people that deal with us in the organisation, they're back out the cupboard now. They're actually dealing with their day-to-day business and realising we need to do something about this. So I've noticed really in the last 2-3 weeks that our conversations are going in the right direction now.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Chantel, any more questions? I'm conscious that our hour is up.
Yeah, I've got 2 more questions. Just quickly, do you want me to run the poll questions now very quickly, and then we go back to Q&A? Or do you want me to Q? Yeah, we'll quickly do these poll questions. So the first one is appearing on your screens now. So the question is, are you fully aware of your organisation's legal obligations under DSS as an applied since November 18? So these are just to gauge an understanding from our audience. 100% yes so far. Just give it a couple more seconds.
I think we've had quite a few people have had to drop off just at 1:30 there. Chantel, so I've noticed that, you know, typically we don't leave a lot of time in between our calls these days. We're not travelling, so we've got a 12:30, 1:30, 2:30. So we might not get the sort of what we would hope from the polls now that we've had so many drop-offs.
I can also always include these in the follow-up email, and we can gauge responses from people that way for you as well. That's not a problem. So I'm just going to quickly end this one now. We had 100% yes on that one. And the next one, here we go. So the next question, there we are. I apologise. Do you currently have fraud prevention measures in place when taking card payments? A simple yes, no again. If we just quickly get the
yeah.
Fantastic. That's good.
Just interesting. One obligation. I know people have said 100%, but if you do have spoken card data in your environment, if your agents can hear card data, you know, spoken by the customer, then that agent's in the card data environment. And I wonder how many people are doing providing evidence that they're doing a data protection policy education program, that where actually they've got evidence that everybody that accesses the card data environment signs that they do that. That's not once a year, that's every 12 weeks, right? Every 12 weeks. Go into any call center that's listening to card payments, said, show me the last year or 2 years evidence of you meeting this requirement, right? I'm not sure that they've done that. right? I'm really not sure that they've done that. So there's some detail here that puts organizations in a defendable position. And I do think that this is something that by taking card data out of the environment, you get rid of so much hassle and simplify the whole process, as Troy was saying in the slide we showed earlier.
That's great, thank you. I'll just quickly move on to the questions that we have. So Steve, can I confirm that Secure Pay is better than DTMF suppression?
Is it better?
Yes.
I think it's horses for courses, really. To be honest with you, it depends on the merchant's requirements. So IVR and DTMF suppression are very solid, compliant ways of taking payments. However, there can be some hardware issues. There can be some deployment issues. Whereas Secure Pay is cloud-based, so it's very quick, easy, and cost-effective to deploy. And it extends further than just taking a compliant payment, as we've detailed in the presentation there, that it can help negate fraud and fraud-related chargebacks. It can reduce your processing costs quite significantly because it's processed as a secure transaction rather than a non-secure. And that then enables merchants that are delivering goods or services to a third-party delivery address to do so more securely. So it's probably better in certain use cases, but there's still a place for IVR and DTMF suppression in the industry for sure.
I back Steve's point. I think it is horses for courses. There are around 6 major differences in the whole process. One of the major points is that I can use a stolen card all day through IVR, through DTMF, either as an attended, through with the agent present, or if it's an IVR. And it does have a cost impact, but you need to look at things in the round and address the whole customer experience and what your future customer contact strategy is and how much of that is digital. So I think looking at telephony based and digital based, I think you have to look at everything in the round.
That's great, thank you. And final question before we do close off, Debbie or John maybe, how can we get further support to understand our PCI requirements?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do really, Chantel, I see you've just shared our details. It would really make sense. Anyone that's looking for further information, I know there's a couple of people posted privately there, just get in touch with us after this event and we can arrange a call and discuss, what things look like for your own organisation.
That's fantastic. John, anything to add at all?
Yeah, I think the PCI Council have gone to great efforts to prepare the call center industry for the shift in fraud, the same shift in fraud that they saw from face-to-face transactions in retail outlets through to the internet. And they envisage this shift in fraud. So as a backup to going to Debbie, have a look at the PCI Council website, have a look at the information supplement protecting telephone-based payment card data. And I think we've probably got a guide to that guide as well that we can share with people.
And the guide to the guide is really important actually, because it makes it far simpler for people to follow. So very good point there. John, thank you for that.
That's great, thank you. If you want to provide links for those, John, I can enclose those in the follow-up email to everybody. That'd be fantastic, thank you. Well, I think that concludes today's session. Thank you very much to everybody. If there's no more questions, I don't think I can see any there. So I'm just going to wrap things up if that's okay. So I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to attend our session today. And we all hope that you found it informative and take away some thought-provoking ideas. I just want to say a very special thank you to all our presenters, Debbie, Stephen and John. And just a reminder that today's session has been recorded and the link for the replay will be emailed to you all within the next 24 hours. Again, if you have any direct questions for our presenters, I have posted their contact details in the chat box. Please feel free to screenshot them or to copy and paste. But again, these will be sent to your inboxes very shortly. For a full list of all upcoming UKCCF webinars, please visit our events page on our website, www.uk-ccf.co.uk/events. We look forward to welcoming you all again soon. Thank you very much. Stay safe and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.